Colorado Territory, 1870. The biting winter wind swept across the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains like a hungry ghost, searching for any warmth to steal. Warren Xanders pulled his worn leather coat tighter against his lean frame as he stared at the small wooden cross marking the grave of his wife Sarah. 3 winters had passed since influenza had taken her and their unborn child, leaving nothing but a hollow ache in the 26-year-old rancher's chest. "No sense talking to the dead," he muttered, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "They don't answer back." Yet he stood there anyway, as he did every Sunday, hat clutched in his gloved hands, his sandy brown hair ruffling in the wind. The small homestead behind him, a sturdy cabin, barn, and corral, represented 5 years of backbreaking work. What had once been their dream was now just his burden. The neighboring ranchers and townsfolk in nearby Trinidad had stopped their pitying looks, but their whispered matchmaking attempts hadn't ceased. Warren mounted his chestnut gelding and clicked his tongue, urging the horse homeward. The land was beautiful but unforgiving, rocky outcrops, pine forests, and rolling meadows that could sustain cattle but demanded constant vigilance. Just like life itself. His blue eyes scanned the horizon habitually, a practice born of both caution and loneliness. "A man's meant to stand alone out here," he told himself for the 100th time. "Loving someone just gives this country another way to break you." This was the truth he'd constructed since Sarah's death, that the frontier was no place for love, only survival. Better to focus on the ranch, the cattle, the day-to-day work that kept him too exhausted to remember his dreams. As Warren crested the hill overlooking his property, he noticed something wrong. Smoke. Not the controlled plume from his chimney, but the thick, angry clouds of something larger burning. He dug his heels into his horse's flanks, heart pounding as he galloped toward the homestead. The barn was ablaze, orange flames licking at the wooden structure, devouring the hay stored inside. His cattle, thankfully in the far pasture, weren't threatened, but the building itself was nearly gone. Warren leaped from his horse, grabbing a bucket and racing to the water pump. A futile gesture, the fire had too much of a head start. As he worked frantically to save what he could, movement caught his eye. 3 riders watching from the tree line. They wore no distinctive clothing, but their posture, confident, unhurried, told him this was no accident. They'd been waiting to make sure he saw their handiwork before they disappeared into the forest. Warren collapsed onto the hard ground as the barn roof caved in with a shower of sparks. The Barton brothers, it had to be. They'd been pressuring him to sell his land for months, claiming they needed the water rights. Each refusal had been met with escalating threats. "You'll break before we do, Xanders," Miles Barton had said last week in town. One way or another. Warren spent the night keeping the fire from spreading, exhaustion seeping into his bones along with the acrid smell of smoke. By morning, nothing remained of the barn but charred timbers and ash. He'd need to rebuild before winter set in fully, a nearly impossible task for one man. He was hauling away debris when he heard hoofbeats approaching. His rifle was propped against the cabin wall, too far to reach. Warren straightened, wiping soot-blackened hands on his trousers, ready to confront whoever was coming. It wasn't the Bartons. Sheriff Dawson Ellis rode up, his weathered face grim beneath his gray mustache. "Heard about your trouble," the lawman said, dismounting. "Figured I'd ride out." "Bartons," Warren said simply. The sheriff surveyed the damage. "Could be, got no proof, though." "You and I both know it was them." "Knowing and proving are different matters in the law," the sheriff sighed. "Might be time to consider their offer, son. Man alone can't hold against determined enemies." Warren's jaw tightened. This land was Sarah's dream. "I'm not selling." "Then you'd best find help," Sheriff Ellis hesitated. "There's something else. Found a girl yesterday, half-starved, hiding in the livery. Apache by the look of her, but speaks good English. Says she escaped from some mountain men who took her after killing her family." Warren frowned. "What's that got to do with me?" "Nobody wants her in town. Folks are still raw about the raids last year. I can't keep her locked up, and I can't let her go or she'll likely die before reaching any friendly tribe." The realization hit Warren. "You want me to take her in? Are you mad?" "You need help." "She needs shelter." The sheriff's eyes were steady. "Sometimes Providence works in strange ways." "An Apache girl here," Warren laughed bitterly. "The Bartons would use that as an excuse to run me off for sure. Your nearest neighbor is 5 miles away." Who's to know? Sheriff Ellis removed his hat, revealing thinning hair. She's just a girl, Warren, 19 or 20 at most, scared half to death. Warren stared at the burned ruins of his barn. He did need help, and hiring hands was expensive, but an Indian girl, the very idea seemed like inviting more trouble. I'll pay her fair wages once she's able to work, Warren finally said, knowing he sounded grudging. But only until spring, then she goes her own way. The sheriff nodded. I'll bring her out tomorrow. After Ellis left, Warren sat on his porch step, wondering if he'd lost his mind. The frontier had rules about such things. White men and Indian women didn't mix, not respectably. But he wasn't offering anything improper, just employment when he desperately needed help and she desperately needed safety. Just until spring, he repeated to the empty yard, as if making the promise to Sarah's memory. The next day dawned clear and cold. Warren had cleared most of the smaller debris from the barn site and was marking out dimensions for rebuilding when Sheriff Ellis's wagon appeared. Warren set down his tools and walked out to meet them, apprehension tightening his chest. The girl who climbed down from the wagon looked nothing like the savage he'd half expected. She wore a simple calico dress, likely a donation from the church ladies, though it hung awkwardly on her slender frame. Her black hair was pulled back in a single braid that reached the middle of her back, and her skin was the color of sun-warmed leather. But it was her eyes that caught Warren, large, dark, and wary, taking in everything around her with careful assessment. "This is Rose Many Stars," Sheriff Ellis said. "She's chosen to use the Christian name the mission school gave her." The girl Rose met Warren's gaze steadily but said nothing. "She understands everything," the sheriff continued. "Reads and writes too. The missionary who educated her said she was his brightest student before her people took her back." Warren nodded stiffly. "Miss Many Stars." "The name is Rose," she said, her voice soft but clear with only a slight accent. "Rose Medicine." "Rose then," Warren amended. "I'm Warren Xanders. This is my ranch." She looked pointedly at the burned barn. "Your ranch is damaged." "Yes, that's why I need help," he gestured toward the cabin. "You'll have the small room off the kitchen. I'll sleep in the loft. Your duties will include cooking, cleaning, helping with rebuilding, and later with the cattle." She nodded once, accepting the terms without negotiation. Sheriff Ellis handed Warren a small bundle, her things not much. After the sheriff departed, Warren showed Rose through the cabin. It was simple but solid, a main room with a fireplace and kitchen area, his bedroom, and the small room that had once been intended as a nursery. He'd never had the heart to use it for anything else. Now Rose stood in the doorway, looking at the narrow bed and single chest of drawers. "You had a wife," she stated, noticing the feminine touches that still remained in the main room, a patchwork quilt, curtains at the windows. "She died." 3 years ago, the word still scraped his throat raw. Rose nodded as if this explained everything about him. Perhaps it did. "I will cook now," she said, moving toward the kitchen with quiet efficiency. Warren returned to work outside, trying to ignore the strange feeling of having another presence in his home after so long alone. By dusk, the smell of cooking drew him back inside, where he found Rose setting the table with stew and biscuits. They ate in silence at first, until Warren felt compelled to speak. "How did you come to be with those mountain men?" Rose's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "They raided our camp while the men were hunting. Killed the old ones, took the younger women." Her voice remained even, though her knuckles whitened around the spoon. "4 of us. I am the only one who escaped." Warren looked down at his plate, wishing he hadn't asked. "I'm sorry." "Everyone is sorry," she replied. "It changes nothing." Later, as Warren lay in the loft staring at the ceiling, he realized Rose's presence had momentarily made him forget his own troubles. There was something about her quiet strength that commanded respect. She'd suffered worse than he had yet kept moving forward. Just until spring, he reminded himself. But for the first time in 3 years, he fell asleep without his customary whispered good night to Sarah's memory. The next weeks established a rhythm as they worked to rebuild the barn. Rose proved surprisingly strong and capable, handing tools, holding boards in place, and learning quickly. She spoke little but observed everything. Warren found himself explaining his actions, filling the silence with words he'd stored up during his years alone. "My father taught me to always cut joints this way," he said one morning, demonstrating a technique for the barn's frame. Takes longer, but it'll outlast us both. My father said much the same about making baskets, Rose replied. That good work honors both maker and user. Warren glanced at her, surprised by the longest sentence she'd offered yet. Wise man, your father. He was killed by soldiers when I was 12. Her voice remained matter of fact. That is when the missionaries took me. Warren hammered a nail with perhaps more force than necessary. This country has seen too much death. All countries see death, Rose said, handing him another nail. It is how people respond to it that matters. The words stayed with Warren that night. How had he responded to Sarah's death? By withdrawing, by turning his grief into a shield against the world. Was that honoring her memory or betraying it? December brought heavy snow, halting work on the barn. Warren spent the days repairing tack and tools in the cabin while Rose cooked, cleaned, and revealed another skill, beautiful beadwork she created in the evenings by the fire. One night he found himself watching her nimble fingers as they threaded tiny beads into intricate patterns. What does that design mean? He asked. Rose didn't look up. It tells of transformation, how the caterpillar becomes the butterfly. How all things can change their nature. Do you believe that things people can truly change? Now she raised her eyes to his. I have seen it, the gentle become cruel, the cruel become gentle. Even you are changing, Warren Xanders. He shifted uncomfortably. I'm the same man I've always been. No, she returned to her beadwork. When I came, you spoke to your wife's spirit every night, now you do not. Warren stared at her, stunned that she had somehow known about his private ritual. That doesn't mean I've forgotten her. Of course not, but perhaps you are remembering how to live again. Rose's expression softened slightly. This is good. The dead do not wish us to join them too soon. The blunt wisdom of her words struck him like a physical blow. Was that what he'd been doing, gradually dying inside while his body continued its daily routine? As Christmas approached, Warren rode into Trinidad for supplies, leaving Rose at the ranch. The town was decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, a forced gaiety that had always made his grief feel more acute. He completed his business quickly, eager to return home. At the general store, Mabel Whitney cornered him by the dry goods. The widow had made her interest in him clear over the past year. Warren Xanders, you've been a stranger in town, she said, her blonde curls bouncing as she smiled. I'd hoped you might join us for Christmas dinner. Thank you, Mrs. Whitney, but I have too much work, he replied politely. Her smile faltered. A man shouldn't be alone on Christmas, it isn't natural. I manage well enough. Mabel lowered her voice. There are rumors, Warren, about an Indian woman staying at your place. People are talking. Warren felt heat rise to his face. Miss Medicine is my hired help, nothing more, and it's no one's business but my own. Of course, Mabel said, though her expression suggested otherwise, but do be careful. The Bartons are looking for any excuse to cause you trouble. As if summoned by her words, Miles Barton pushed through the door with his younger brother Frank. They spotted Warren immediately. Well, look who's in town, Miles called, his voice carrying through the store. The man who prefers squaws to proper women. Warren set down his purchases, turning slowly. I'm not looking for trouble, Barton. Should have thought of that before you brought an Apache onto decent land, Frank added, after what their kind did to the Miller family last year. Rose had nothing to do with that, Warren said, his hands clenching involuntarily. Miles stepped closer. So it's Rose now, is it? Got mighty familiar mighty quick. That's enough. Sheriff Ellis appeared in the doorway, hand resting on his holstered pistol. Take your business elsewhere, Bartons. The brothers retreated, but Miles pointed at Warren. This isn't finished. No decent rancher wants Indian lovers for neighbors. On the ride home, Warren's mind churned with worry. The confrontation made clear that his arrangement with Rose was known throughout the county. It would give the Bartons the perfect pretext for further harassment, possibly worse. The cabin came into view, smoke curling from the chimney, windows glowing with lamplight. For the first time since Sarah died, the sight filled him with something other than emptiness. It looked like a home again. Inside, Rose had cleaned thoroughly and placed pine boughs on the mantel. The savory smell of rabbit stew filled the room. She looked up from her cooking, and Warren was struck by how naturally she belonged in this space. You are troubled, she said, reading his expression. Warren hung his coat by the door. Had some words with the Bartons in town. They know you're here. Rose nodded, unsurprised. You wish me to leave? No, he said, the forceful response surprising them both. No, he repeated more calmly, but we should be prepared for trouble. That night Warren dreamed of Sarah for the first time in months. Not as she was in death, pale and wasted from illness, but as she had been in life, laughing as she hung laundry in the summer breeze. In the dream, she smiled at him and said, "It's time, Warren. Time to live again." He woke with tears on his face and the certainty that something fundamental had shifted inside him. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. Warren rose early and went to the small storage cellar to retrieve something he'd hidden among his purchases. When Rose emerged from her room, he handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Merry Christmas," he said awkwardly. Rose took it with evident surprise. "I have nothing for you." "You've done plenty. This place hasn't been so well kept in years." She carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a set of fine beading needles and colorful glass beads. Her fingers traced the vibrant colors with reverence. "They're beautiful," she whispered, and Warren was startled to see tears in her eyes. "Thank you." "I noticed yours were getting dull," he said, suddenly embarrassed by the personal nature of the gift. Rose disappeared into her room, returning with something in her hand. "This is not finished, but I wish you to have it now." She handed him a beaded leather band. The intricate pattern showed a soaring eagle against a blue sky. "It is a symbol of freedom," she explained, "of rising above pain to see the wider world again." Warren closed his fingers around the gift, touched beyond words by its significance. "Thank you, Rose." Something changed between them after Christmas. The silence that had characterized their early days together gave way to conversation. Rose shared stories of her childhood among her people, of the grandmother who had taught her beadwork and healing, of her time at the mission school where she had learned to read from a kind-hearted teacher. Warren found himself speaking of Sarah, not just her death, but her life. How they had met at a town social in Kansas, how she had dreamed of a ranch in the mountains, how her laugh could brighten the darkest day. "She sounds like someone who embraced life," Rose said one evening as they sat by the fire. The barn was nearly finished, a testament to their shared labor. "She did. Even at the end, she worried more about me than herself." Warren stared into the flames. "She made me promise not to waste my life grieving. I've broken that promise these 3 years." Rose's voice was gentle. "Grief is not wasted time, it is necessary time. But perhaps now you are ready to keep your promise." Warren looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the hired help or the Apache girl, but a woman of remarkable strength and grace. Her high cheekbones and deep brown eyes reflected the firelight, and he suddenly realized she was beautiful. The thought startled him so much that he stood abruptly. "It's late. We should rest." In January, they moved the cattle to the lower pastures and completed the barn. Rose had proven adept with the gentler cows, her soft voice and patient manner calming even the most skittish animals. Warren found himself watching her more often, admiring the confident way she moved, the intelligence in her eyes. It was during a rare warm spell in February that everything changed. They were checking fence lines in the north pasture when Warren spotted riders approaching, the Barton brothers with 3 of their hired men. "Get behind me," Warren said quietly, his hand moving to the rifle strapped to his saddle. The Bartons reined in 20 yards away. Miles's face wore a triumphant smile that sent a chill through Warren's blood. "Afternoon, Xanders," Miles called. "Thought we'd pay a neighborly visit. See how you and your squaw are getting along." Warren kept his voice level. "You're not welcome here, Barton, ride on." "That's not friendly," Miles gestured to his men who spread out slightly. "Especially since we've brought some important news. Judge Carlton just signed an order. This land's been reassigned due to improper use." "What are you talking about?" Frank Barton held up a paper. Indian Intercourse Act of 1834 prohibits white settlement on Indian territory, but it also prohibits Indians from occupying white settlements. You've got an unauthorized Apache living on land deeded to white settlers. That makes your claim invalid. The absurdity of the claim would have been laughable if not for the deadly serious expressions on their faces. Warren knew they had no legal ground to stand on, but legal matters meant little on the frontier when 5 armed men faced a man and woman alone. "Rose is my employee, not a settler," Warren said, "and this is private property." "Leave now." Miles shook his head in mock regret. "We're authorized to remove you both, by force if necessary." Warren felt Rose move beside him, straightening in her saddle. "These men lie," she said clearly. "There is no such order." "Shut your mouth, squaw," Frank snapped. "My name is Rose Medicine," she replied, her dignity a rebuke to their crudeness, "and I know the white man's laws better than you. I studied them at the mission school." Her unexpected defiance momentarily stunned the Bartons, giving Warren time to assess their options. They were outnumbered, but he knew every inch of his land. The rocky outcropping to the east offered cover if they could reach it. "Last chance," Miles said, his hand dropping to his holstered pistol. "Clear out by sundown or we burn you out." Warren made his decision in an instant. "Rose, run!" He fired his rifle over the Bartons' heads, causing their horses to rear and creating momentary confusion. They galloped toward the rocks, bullets kicking up dirt behind them. Warren felt a burning graze across his arm but kept riding, Rose just ahead of him. They reached the outcropping and abandoned their horses, scrambling up the rocks to a defensible position. "Are you hurt?" Rose asked, seeing the blood on his sleeve. "Just a graze." Warren peered over the rocks. The Bartons had taken cover behind a fallen tree. "They'll wait for dark, then try to flank us." Rose tore a strip from her petticoat and bound his arm. "What will we do?" "Make it to the cabin if we can." "I've got more ammunition there." He met her eyes. "I'm sorry, Rose, this is my fight, not yours." "They would have come eventually," she said with simple certainty. "Men like that always do." They held their position as afternoon waned toward evening. The Bartons called out occasional taunts but made no direct assault. Warren knew they were waiting for darkness to press their advantage. "We need to move before dusk," he told Rose. "There's a dry creek bed that runs behind us. If we follow it, we can circle around toward the cabin." Rose nodded, her face calm despite the danger. "I will go first. I move more quietly." Before he could protest, she had slipped away, gliding down the backside of the rocks with barely a sound. Warren followed, amazed at how she seemed to find footing where none appeared to exist. They had covered half the distance to the cabin when a shout indicated they'd been spotted. New shots rang out, closer this time. Warren pushed Rose ahead of him as they ran, exposing himself to protect her. The bullet took him high in the back, the impact driving him to his knees. Rose turned back immediately, her face transforming with horror. "Go," Warren gasped, pain radiating through his chest. "Get to the cabin." Instead, she dragged him behind a boulder, displaying strength that belied her slender frame. Blood soaked his shirt, and breathing became increasingly difficult. Warren knew the bullet had likely punctured his lung. "Leave me," he whispered. "Save yourself." Rose's eyes flashed with determination. "No, I will not leave you to die alone as I left my sisters with the mountain men." Her words penetrated Warren's pain-fogged mind. "That wasn't your fault. Nor is this yours," she pressed her hand against his wound. "But I will not repeat my mistake. We live or die together now." The approaching footsteps of the Bartons seemed to seal their fate. Warren closed his eyes, waiting for the final shots. Instead, new gunfire erupted, but not directed at them. Shouts of surprise and pain followed. "Xanders, Miss Medicine, it's Sheriff Ellis." Rose called back, and moments later, the sheriff appeared with 3 deputies and Doc Wilson from town. "Got word the Bartons were planning something," Ellis explained as the doctor examined Warren. "Mabel Whitney overheard them at the mercantile and sent her boy to fetch me." Warren drifted in and out of consciousness as they transported him to the cabin. He was vaguely aware of Rose refusing to leave his side, of the doctor extracting the bullet, of voices discussing his chances in hushed tones. For 3 days, fever held him in its grip. He dreamed of Sarah walking away into a blinding light, turning once to smile at him before disappearing. He dreamed of his parents, long dead back in Kansas. And he dreamed of Rose, her face hovering above his, her cool hands on his brow, her voice singing soft songs in her native tongue. When he finally opened his eyes with a clear mind, it was Rose he saw, dozing in a chair beside his bed. Her hair had come loose from its usual braid, cascading over her shoulders like a black waterfall. One of her hands rested on the bed near his, as if she had been holding it before sleep claimed her. Warren studied her face, seeing the exhaustion etched there, the worry lines around her eyes. Something powerful and unexpected swelled in his chest, not just gratitude, but a deeper emotion he had thought himself incapable of feeling again. "Rose," he whispered. Her eyes opened instantly, relief flooding her features. "You are back." "Thanks to you," he tried to sit up but fell back with a groan. "Be still," she ordered, helping him sip water. "The bullet nearly took you from this world." "The Bartons." "Miles will hang for attempting murder of a lawman. Frank and one of their men were killed in the fight. The others fled." Warren absorbed this information silently. Death never brought him satisfaction, even of enemies. "Sheriff Ellis has been here each day," Rose continued. "The judge revoked the Bartons' land claim as penalty. Their ranch will be auctioned." "And you?" Warren asked, suddenly fearful of her answer. "Will you still leave in spring?" Rose's expression softened. "Is that what you wish?" "No," he admitted. "I wish you to stay, but I have no right to ask it." She took his hand then, her touch sending warmth through his weakened body. "Among my people, when one saves another's life, they become responsible for that life. We are bound now, you and I." "Is that the only reason you would stay?" Rose's smile held a hint of mischief he had never seen before. "No, Warren Xanders, it is not the only reason." His recovery took weeks, during which Rose never left the ranch. Sheriff Ellis brought news from town, most importantly that Rose's statement had been crucial in discrediting the Bartons' false claims about the land. The territorial judge had officially recognized her legal right to live and work wherever she chose as a free woman. By April, Warren was strong enough to resume light work. They walked the pastures together, planning the spring calving, discussing improvements to the ranch. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Warren finally found the courage to speak the words that had been building in his heart. "When Sarah died, I believed I would never love again," he said quietly. "That the frontier was too harsh for such feelings to survive. I was wrong." Rose turned to him, her dark eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. "I love you, Rose Medicine," Warren continued. "Not as a replacement for what I've lost, but as something new and unexpected, a gift I never thought to receive." "I have loved you since Christmas," she admitted, "when you saw me not as Apache or as servant, but as myself." Warren took her hand. "I don't know if a life together would be easy. There will always be those who disapprove." "All worthwhile paths have stones," Rose said, "but they are easier to navigate with a companion." He smiled at her wisdom. "Then will you walk this path with me, as my wife, my partner in this land?" "Yes," she answered simply, "I will." They were married in May by a traveling preacher who asked no questions about Rose's heritage, seeing only two people who clearly loved each other. Sheriff Ellis and Doc Wilson stood as witnesses, along with a few of the neighboring ranchers who had come to respect Warren's determination and Rose's quiet strength. As Warren placed a ring on Rose's finger, silver set with turquoise that she had helped design, he felt Sarah's presence one last time, a gentle approval that finally released him from the grip of grief. That night, as husband and wife, they stood on their porch looking out at the land that had brought them together. "What do you see when you look at our ranch?" Warren asked, his arm around Rose's waist. She leaned against him, secure in their shared future. "I see what my grandmother's stories always promised, a place where two rivers meet and become stronger, where the eagle and the wolf hunt together. Where the wisdom of different peoples creates something new and beautiful." Warren kissed her forehead, marveling at how this harsh frontier, which he had once believed could only take from him, had instead given him a second chance at love and life. "In the spring," Rose said softly, placing his hand over her abdomen, "our family will grow." Joy spread through Warren's chest, bright and limitless as the western sky. The ranch that had once been merely land to defend had transformed into a true home, a place of love, hope, and new beginnings. As darkness settled over the Colorado territory, Warren and Rose Xanders stood together in the doorway of their cabin, no longer alone against the wilderness, but united in the most powerful bond of all, one forged through hardship, respect, and love that had survived the tests of the wild frontier.